in the heart of a sprawling estate, where manicured lawns stretched endlessly and the scent of blooming roses lingered in the air, a grand stable stood as a testament to opulence. Within its confines, horses of impeccable lineage resided, each more majestic than the last. Among them was a young stallion named Orion, whose once gleaming chestnut coat now bore the marks of neglect and injury. Orion had been the pride of the estate, a horse destined for greatness in the racing circuits. His powerful strides and spirited demeanor had captured the attention of many, including the estate's owner, a millionaire named Charles Montgomery. Charles was a man who valued perfection and success above all else. To him, Orion was an investment, a means to further elevate his status among the elite. However, fate had other plans. During a training session, Orion suffered a severe injury. The veterinarian spoke in hushed tones about the slim chances of a full recovery. The news was a blow to Charles's ambitions. A horse that couldn't race was of no use to him. Decisions were made swiftly in his world, and sentimentality had no place. Orion was to be sold, discarded like a tarnished trophy. The auction was a somber affair. Potential buyers glanced at Orion with disinterest, noting his bandaged leg and the weariness in his eyes. The once proud stallion stood silently, as if aware of his diminished worth in the eyes of those around him. Bids were scarce, and the price dwindled to a mere fraction of what he was once valued. Amidst the crowd, a young woman named Eliza stood, her eyes fixed on Orion. Dressed modestly, with worn boots and calloused hands, she was a stark contrast to the affluent attendees. Eliza had always harbored a deep love for horses. Growing up on the outskirts of the city, she'd spent countless hours reading about them, dreaming of the day she could have one of her own. Eliza's heart ached as she observed Orion's plight. She saw beyond the injuries and the neglect. In his eyes, she recognized a spirit that hadn't been entirely extinguished. When the auctioneer's gavel was about to close the bid with no takers, Eliza's hand shot up impulsively. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as she offered a sum that was laughably low, yet met with no competition. The transaction was completed swiftly. Papers were signed, and Orion was handed over to Eliza. Charles barely spared a glance, dismissing both as inconsequential. To him, the chapter was closed. Leading Orion away from the grandeur of the estate, Eliza spoke to him in soothing tones. "We'll get you better," she whispered, feeling the warmth of his breath as he hobbled beside her. The journey to her humble abode was long, but Eliza was determined. She guided Orion through bustling streets and quiet lanes, finally reaching a small plot of land she rented on the city's outskirts. The stable was modest, a far cry from the luxurious accommodations Orion was accustomed to. Yet it was clean and filled with the scent of fresh hay. Eliza had prepared a soft bed, ensuring his comfort. She gently removed the bandages, assessing the extent of his injuries. The wound was deep, the result of an untreated fracture that had been aggravated over time. Days turned into nights as Eliza devoted herself to Orion's care. She researched tirelessly, consulting local veterinarians and poring over medical journals. With limited funds, she improvised, creating poultices from herbs and ensuring his diet was rich in nutrients to aid recovery. Orion was wary at first. The betrayal he'd experienced left him guarded. He flinched at sudden movements and often retreated to the corner of the stable. But Eliza was patient. She spent hours simply sitting beside him, reading aloud or humming soft tunes. Gradually, the walls Orion had built began to crumble. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Eliza entered the stable to find Orion standing without support, his eyes alert and ears perked forward. It was a small victory, but significant. Tears welled up in her eyes as she approached him, extending a hand. Orion lowered his head, allowing her to stroke his muzzle. The bond between them solidified in that moment. Word of Orion's recovery spread through the community. Neighbors who once viewed Eliza's endeavor with skepticism now offered assistance. Some brought supplies, while others volunteered their time. The local veterinarian, impressed by Eliza's dedication, provided pro bono services, ensuring Orion received the best care possible. As weeks turned into months, Orion's strength returned. His coat regained its luster, and the spark in his eyes was unmistakable. Eliza introduced gentle exercises, leading him through the fields and allowing him to graze under the open sky. Their connection deepened with each passing day. However, shadows from the past loomed. Charles Montgomery, upon hearing rumors of Orion's remarkable recovery, felt a pang of regret. His decision to discard the stallion now seemed hasty. Driven by a mix of pride and the desire to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his, Charles sought to retrieve Orion. One crisp morning, as Eliza tended to the stable, a sleek black car pulled up. Charles stepped out, his demeanor as imposing as ever. He approached with a calculated smile, eyes scanning the surroundings with thinly veiled disdain. "I've come to take back my horse," he stated, his tone leaving little room for negotiation. Eliza's heart raced. She positioned herself protectively between Charles and Orion. "He's not yours anymore," she replied firmly. "You sold him. He's mine now." Charles chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "I was misinformed about his potential. Name your price." Eliza shook her head, determination blazing in her eyes. "He's not for sale." Tension thickened the air. Charles, unaccustomed to defiance, narrowed his eyes. "You're making a mistake," he warned. Eliza stood her ground. "The mistake was yours. You gave up on him. I won't." Charles studied her for a moment longer before turning on his heel. "This isn't over," he tossed over his shoulder as he walked away. The encounter left Eliza shaken but resolute. She knew challenges lay ahead, but her commitment to Orion was unwavering. Together, they'd faced adversity and emerged stronger. No amount of wealth or intimidation could sever the bond they'd forged. As the days grew warmer and Orion's rehabilitation progressed, Eliza began to entertain dreams of entering local competitions, not for glory or recognition, but to showcase Orion's resilience and the power of second chances. She believed that their story could inspire others to look beyond imperfections and see the potential within. Eliza's journey with Orion was far from over. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with obstacles and unforeseen trials. But with trust as their foundation and love as their guide, they were prepared to face whatever came their way, side by side. The wind carried the scent of pine and rain as the mare stumbled forward through the muddy trail, her steps slow, trembling, but determined. Alina held the reins gently, her boots caked in wet earth, her hands raw from days of labor. Though she had never owned a horse, she had always understood them, read their silences, their fears, their fleeting glimmers of trust. The mare had stopped flinching when she approached. That was something. She had named her Ember. Each morning began before the sun crept over the hills. Alina would haul water from the well, fill the troughs, and prepare a mash of oats and herbs she had bartered for at the edge of town. Her neighbors, scattered across the valley, watched her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. A few shook their heads when she passed, muttering about hopeless causes. But Alina ignored them. Ember had been broken, not finished. The wounds on the horse's flanks were healing, though slowly. The jagged scar above her left eye had faded into a dull line beneath soft, dark fur. The limp remained, less pronounced now, but Alina noticed how Ember tried to mask it, especially when strangers came close. She was proud still. Some spirit, buried beneath the pain, remained untouched. Alina spent her evenings in the barn, curled beside the mare in the straw, reading aloud from old veterinary books she'd borrowed from the village library. Her voice, though cracked with fatigue, became a balm to Ember. The mare's ears would twitch at certain phrases, as if recognizing fragments of language long forgotten. Sometimes, Ember would nudge Alina gently with her nose, demanding another page. It wasn't all warmth and whispered comfort, though. Ember had bad days. Days when she'd recoil from touch, when her breathing would quicken at sudden sounds. Alina suspected it was more than physical pain. There were ghosts in the mare's memory, haunting images of past cruelty, of being forced to perform, of being discarded when she failed. On one such evening, after a particularly violent storm, Ember refused to eat. She paced her stall anxiously, eyes wide with something primal, panic, perhaps grief. Alina stayed with her the entire night, murmuring softly, not touching, simply being present. By morning, Ember allowed her to drape a blanket over her back. That was progress. Word began to spread, slowly, like fire whispered on wind. They called Alina foolish, stubborn. Some said she was doing it for attention. Others claimed she was delusional. But the mare had changed. Her coat, once dull and patchy, now shimmered beneath the sun. Her eyes, clouded with despair, held flickers of curiosity. Alina had expected judgment. What she hadn't expected were the letters. Folded scraps of paper, tucked beneath her door or pinned to the barn post. Notes from strangers, other horse lovers, former trainers, even an old jockey, sharing advice, encouragement, offering supplies. One afternoon, she found a basket of carrots and apples left outside the gate, wrapped in burlap. A child-scrawled note read, "For the brave horse." Even the vet, a gruff man named Harold who had laughed at her the day she bought Ember for next to nothing, returned with gentler hands. "You've done something special here," he murmured, listening to Ember's heartbeat. "She's not the same horse." Neither was Alina. She had changed in ways she hadn't fully grasped. Her back ached. Her fingers were permanently stained. Her clothes threadbare. But her spirit had sharpened. She no longer flinched at cruelty or condescension. She had found her purpose in the slow, painstaking process of healing something the world had given up on. But she also knew the world had a short memory and a sharp tongue. And it wasn't done testing her. One morning, a silver SUV pulled up beside the pasture. Alina wiped her hands on her jeans and walked out to meet the man, who stepped from the vehicle. He wore polished boots and a coat that cost more than her monthly rent. His eyes swept the field with disinterest until they landed on Ember. "She's the one," he said. Alina frowned. "Who are you?" "Charles Remington. You bought that mare at the Edison auction, didn't you?" His voice was clipped, rehearsed. "She used to belong to a client of mine. Thoroughbred bloodline. A mistake letting her go like that. We're prepared to make you an offer." Alina stiffened. "She's not for sale." Remington smiled, patronizing. "Everything has a price, especially animals." He paused. "Look, I don't care about sentiment. We're offering 5 figures. Take it, and you can walk away knowing you made a good profit." Ember approached the fence behind Alina, snorting softly. Her eyes locked with the man's. She didn't flinch, but she didn't come closer either. Alina glanced at her, then back at the man. "She's not a thing. And she's not going back to anyone who sees her as one." Remington's smile faded. "You don't understand what you're giving up." "No," Alina replied calmly. "You don't." He left in silence, his tires spitting gravel as he drove away. Alina turned back to Ember and whispered, "You're home. No one's taking you again." That afternoon, Ember trotted for the first time without limping. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't perfect, but it was freedom. Alina stood in the field, tears in her eyes, and laughed as the mare kicked up dirt and danced in a full circle, mane catching the breeze like a banner. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual. Ember had begun to trust not only Alina, but the world again. She no longer shied from loud noises. She grazed near strangers, cautiously but without fear. The villagers who once scoffed now came to the fence, leaning on elbows, marveling at the horse that had defied their predictions. But not everyone watched with admiration. One evening, Alina found the barn door unlatched. Tools scattered, the feed bins upturned. Someone had been there. Ember was safe, but she was nervous, circling her stall in anxious loops. A smear of muddy footprints trailed toward the woods. Alina's heart raced. She knew what this was, a warning. Someone didn't like the attention Ember was getting. Someone who had underestimated the value of what they'd thrown away. She didn't report it. She just reinforced the locks and stayed awake that night, sitting outside the barn with a lantern and a long-handled shovel. The stars glimmered above her, silent witnesses to the quiet war being waged in a forgotten corner of the countryside. The next day, she began training in earnest. Not for competition, though some had begun to whisper that Ember might be ready, but for strength, endurance, confidence. Alina built a makeshift course in the pasture, poles, barrels, uneven terrain. She used soft commands, rewards, and patience. She never forced, only encouraged. Ember responded like a spark catching tinder. Each day brought a new breakthrough. She cleared her first jump with trembling legs and a wild whinny of triumph. Alina clapped so hard her palms stung. "You did it!" she shouted, running to embrace her. They were a team now, inseparable. Two creatures discarded by the world, rising together. Then the letter arrived. It was official, an invitation to the Silver Pines Regional Showcase, one of the most prestigious exhibitions in the area. Not a race, not a competition, but a celebration of rescued horses and their journeys. The kind of event attended by sponsors, scouts, and journalists. The kind of place where stories mattered. Alina stared at the invitation for a long time. Ember nuzzled her elbow, as if sensing the weight of the... Alina stared at the invitation for a long time. Ember nuzzled her elbow, as if sensing the weight of the decision. "You're ready," Alina whispered, folding the letter against her chest. "We both are." The weeks leading up to the showcase passed in a blur of preparation, nerves, and long rides under blushing skies. Alina borrowed a trailer, scrubbed Ember until her coat gleamed, and stitched her own jacket with trembling fingers. The morning of the event, the sky was soft and pale, the breeze light, like the world was holding its breath. As they pulled into the fairgrounds, Alina felt her chest tighten. There were dozens of horses, sleek, towering, magnificent. Ember looked small beside them, ordinary almost. But when she stepped from the trailer and trotted beside Alina, heads turned. Not because she was perfect, but because she was alive, whole, beautiful in a way that only survival could be. The showcase hadn't even begun, and already, Ember was rewriting the ending. The morning mist clung low over the hills like a veil, curling around the railings of the newly painted fence that lined the pasture. The arena sat quiet, dew glistening on its surface. Inside the stable, Laurel tightened the cinch on Sparrow's saddle with steady, practiced hands. The once frail gelding stood taller now, coat glossy, his scars softened by months of care and patience. His eyes still held caution, but they also held trust, and that was worth more than any ribbon or gold-plated trophy. Laurel adjusted the bridle and whispered, "You're ready." "We both are." Outside, cars began rolling in, tires crunching on gravel. Wealthy spectators emerged, clad in designer coats and polished boots, their laughter echoing across the grounds. The local equestrian center had agreed to host the annual Heritage Trials this year, an elite event that drew millionaires, breeders, and buyers from all over the state. Laurel had only been allowed to enter thanks to a last-minute dropout and a well-placed recommendation from Mrs. Hawthorne, the reclusive widow who had been quietly watching Laurel's journey for weeks from afar. As Laurel led Sparrow toward the warm-up ring, whispers trailed behind her. "Isn't that the horse from the junk sale? Did she glue it back together with prayers and duct tape? I heard he collapsed on transport once. Shouldn't even be alive." She ignored them. Words were wind, only action stayed behind. On the opposite end of the ring, Trevor Blackwell stood beside his prized Andalusian stallion, Argent Blaze. The horse gleamed like a silver statue, muscles chiseled beneath its coat. Trevor looked immaculate, his tailored riding coat trimmed in gold. When he saw Laurel approaching, his smirk deepened. "Still chasing fairy tales, are you?" he called across the ring. "You know this event's not a charity parade, right?" Laurel tightened her grip on the reins, but didn't respond. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she guided Sparrow through a light trot, feeling the rhythm under her. The horse moved with grace, not flamboyance. Every motion was the product of quiet rehabilitation, not showing bravado. Inside the observation hall, judges were reviewing the entry list. A younger official raised an eyebrow at Sparrow's name. "Isn't this the mare that was rejected at the Rockford auction last year?" An older man peered over his spectacles. "That's the one. Malnourished, bowed tendon, old racing injuries. They couldn't even get $20 for her." "She's a gelding now," the woman corrected softly, "and his name is Sparrow." The name hung in the air like a quiet challenge. When Laurel's number was called, she entered the arena without ceremony. The course was demanding, tight turns, cross rails followed by high verticals, and a challenging combination that required precision and trust. Trevor had just exited the ring moments before, having completed the run with mechanical perfection. The audience buzzed with admiration, his score solid and seemingly unbeatable. Laurel paused at the gate. She looked down at Sparrow, whose ears twitched forward. "We don't need their approval," she murmured. "Just each other." Then they moved. The crowd stilled. Sparrow flowed through the first sequence with surprising lightness. His strides were smaller than the other horses, but deliberate. Each takeoff was clean, and every landing cushioned with care. The bond between horse and rider was not forged from dominance, but from mutual survival. By the time they reached the final combination, an oxer leading into a high spread, Laurel could feel Sparrow's breath sinking with hers. She leaned slightly, whispering with her body. He surged forward, clearing the last jump with room to spare. Silence followed, then a wave of applause, uncertain at first, then swelling into full force. Trevor's jaw clenched as the announcer read the provisional scores. Laurel had matched his time, down to the 10th of a second, but her artistic marks were higher. The judge who had once dismissed Sparrow as unsalvageable nodded solemnly as he marked the scorecard. In the stabling area, Laurel dismounted and loosened Sparrow's girth, rubbing his neck affectionately. "I told you," she whispered. "You were never broken. Just waiting." Trevor approached, hands in his pockets. His stallion shifted behind him, restless despite his earlier performance. "I underestimated you," he said flatly. "Didn't think that horse would make it to the starting gate, let alone place." Laurel didn't meet his gaze. "He didn't need your approval either." He scoffed, but there was no real bite to it this time. "You know, buyers are going to come sniffing. After today, that horse's value just quadrupled." She looked at him then, eyes steady. "He's not for sale." A pause, then a slow nod. The next day brought headlines in local and regional papers. "Rejected horse stuns elite trials. Unknown rider wins hearts." From wounded to winner, the story of Sparrow. Mrs. Hawthorne paid Laurel a quiet visit the following week, handing her a folded letter along with an old photograph. In it, a young girl stood next to a chestnut horse, beaming. The girl was Mrs. Hawthorne herself. The horse had the same wary eyes as Sparrow. "He reminds me of mine," she said softly. "I lost him in a flood. I never thought I'd see that look again. The one that says, 'I've been through fire and come out steel.'" Laurel unfolded the letter. It was an invitation to train at the Hawthorne estate, a sanctuary for retired and rescued racehorses. The letter included a stipend and a place to live, modest but enough. It wasn't luxury. It was something better, purpose. Weeks later, Sparrow stood in a new paddock, grazing beside other horses who bore the same quiet battle scars. Laurel watched from the porch, a mug of coffee in her hands and sunlight warming her shoulders. She still remembered the day she first saw him, mud-covered, limping, eyes full of mistrust. She remembered the sneers, the cold rejection, the way the auctioneer had barely looked at her when she made that final bid. But none of that mattered now, because the world hadn't believed in Sparrow, and Sparrow didn't need the world. He just needed one person to believe. Laurel turned at the sound of approaching footsteps. A young girl, maybe 12, stepped shyly toward the paddock. "Is that him?" she asked, pointing. Laurel smiled. "That's Sparrow." "Can I pet him?" "Only if he lets you." The girl approached slowly, hand extended. Sparrow lifted his head, watching her. After a moment's pause, he took a cautious step forward and nuzzled her palm. Laurel watched the girl's eyes widen with wonder. "You saved him?" the girl asked, without looking away. Laurel paused, then answered truthfully. "No, we saved each other."